DLake Creates.
Hey, I'm Darren Lake, and welcome to this podcast series collaboration between Digital Ninjas, DLake Creative, and Podpaste. We're on a mission to supercharge your brand, company, or organization and help you change the world through digital strategy, training, and insights. Each episode, we answer questions and talk about one specific idea to help you market and run your business better. And we do that by making them easy to digest, short, and concise, because we've all got a business to run.
All right, guys, super pumped today to be here with three of my favorite marketers. Some people said it was dangerous to have three of Australia's best marketers all in the one place, all at the one time. But the best learning happens in dangerous situations. So great to be here with Natalie, Darren, Jensen, and let's jump straight into it. Excited to unpack a lot of these guys' hidden talents, talk about some of their biggest box office hits in marketing. And what I've found, it's always great to learn from people that, are 3, 5, 10 years ahead of you in the journey. These guys are the cream of the crop. Can't wait for you to learn and unpack some of their lessons today. So let's get straight into it. I wanted to start with Jensen. And you're working on some super exciting stuff. What I love about you, Jensen, is you never aim small. It's always big. You always, have that big grand vision. You're working on something really exciting called Together AI. I mean, can you first tell us a bit about Together AI, and then wanted to unpack your customer acquisition strategies? So you've got over 20,000 families. Can you tell us the story of, how you acquired them, what platforms you used?
Yeah, thanks, Brendan. Much appreciated. So Together AI is a digital companion for families to help them navigate the growing up process. How it works is basically the child gets a digital friend that teaches them about emotional intelligence, how to develop resilience, and understanding their, day-to-day, so general stresses. And then it facilitates a conversation between the parent and the child with tools and techniques from leading healthcare professionals. How we really acquired users was we looked at who was going to be the end user that we needed to acquire digitally. For us, we target parents, and the parent then onboards the child, who's the end user. So it's a little different to more of a traditional B2C approach. And how we did that was we found, instead of traditional stuff, what most startups do is they try and educate the market on what their brand is, their product is, their solution, whatnot. We went straight to content creators that looked like our users, approached them to create content for us, and repurpose said content into our advertising channel to give us an overall lower CPI across all platforms. But as with everything's moving towards short-form video-based content, we specialized more in that sort of realm rather than, say, your traditional areas of like blogs or just general podcasts and bits and pieces.
So, there's a lot of chatter about micro influencers versus macro influencers. How did you find these guys to create the content?
Yeah, so really just getting your hands dirty. So looking for influencers on TikTok around different hashtags, looking for influencers on YouTube. Macro's great, but when you're a small startup, micro's the best. You can create that instant relationship. You generate a long-term rapport, so you can actually generate consistent low-cost content for your advertising and other social platform channels. Realistically, it's about building those strong tie connections and then re-educating other networks with those strong tie connections. And what I mean by that is basically, if you can find individuals that look like your user, they'll generally have an audience that you'd want to target as well. So, if you're getting a TikTok mum, content creator, or user-generated content, they'll often have additional communities of similar individuals, similar peers in their community. So yeah, I'd probably say just sort of focus on more of a long tail connection rather than anything else. You don't want to, you can go for sort of quick hacks and growth tactics such as like, scraping competitors' followers and creating artificial social media engagement. But realistically, it's about ensuring that you have that connection with those users for your early stage. We got like 20,000 users within a couple of months on nothing for our wait list, which is great. And then it took us about a year to transition into releasing the app with back and forth, user feedback, user interviews, and then getting the acquisition of 20K installs was pretty straightforward because we'd had built up these relationships with these micro-influencers and micro-creators, and then obviously got their network as well as repurposed said content into our advertising channels.
Wow. So the main distribution channel was TikTok, and then you used that content, the best performing, I presume, on the other platforms as well?
Oh, of course. When it comes to repurposing content, obviously you need to, do simple technical requirements of like removing watermarks and so forth. But every other major social media channel is following short form video content. Now, it doesn't really matter about the production value because people prefer a more authentic connection. And especially when dealing with sort of micro-influencers, you get that. Yeah.
What about all the money I spent today on this production?
Sorry, brother. Polished is great. Unfortunately, it just depends on really your user and what they're used to interacting with. Our users were, mums and dads struggling to connect with their children, and they would often be, watching TikTok with their kids, or they might be on Snapchat, or they might be looking at Instagram Reels, or they might be looking at Facebook Reels. So that type of content doesn't necessarily need to be polished. However, if we're looking at something that has, maybe more of a B2B aspect, you might do short form video that's a little bit more polished, but you'll throw that onto LinkedIn or you'll repurpose that into Twitter. You just have to look at like, where does your audience live online?
And, I always used to think TikTok, cat videos and crazy dancing videos. But yeah, it's amazing that you've made that platform work. And I guess good segue to introduce Natalie from Splash Up. So you're working a lot with engagement on B2B companies as well. So obviously TikTok's the king of engagement. They utilize, a high degree of artificial intelligence, automation. I mean, what are you seeing from some of your customers now? Like how do you help them get better engagement with their customers, and what's working in the market at the moment?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Brendan. So in terms of social media, it's such a powerful source of getting traffic onto your, store or your website. But in terms of converting these users, it then sort of, TikTok doesn't really hold your hand beyond that point. So you still need to convert them and move them from that mid-funnel all the way to checkout, or like to really force them down to, payment, or to resonate with your value prop. And so what we do is we basically allow retailers to have a way for them to have their shoppers have better tools to interact in their store around how they want to interact with products. Like they want to come back to them later. They want to they like particular products with these preferences, and so the store can have build rapport more with their visitors, at the same time have an easier way to come back to that store. So if you look at a lot of retailers as an example, because we work with retailers, we're B2B2C. Once you go and let's say you're looking for this black jacket, you find it on TikTok, you click on that, you see it, but you're kind of scrolling, you're not really in that mindset to purchase now, but you kind of like it, you might want to save it for later. What this brand does is it sees your profile and then probably would remarket that on Facebook, on Instagram, and that's phasing out. But so what we do is we try to get shops or retailers to help you interact with products, express what you like, and also help you come back to them much more easily without needing to rely on retargeting. And so this is more of like a mid-funnel sort of assistance to help them, interact and build loyalty and push them down the funnel a lot more flexibly. That's what we do.
So talking about personalization in marketing, so important in 2022, Darren, or DLake Create, as you're known by your running and media brand. I mean, how do you use personalization in your marketing? Can you tell us, firstly, more about your brand, the story of how you built that up and how you're using personalization?
So I've got a brand. Well, it's me. It's DLake Create, and it's a running and endurance sport brand that helps people perform better throughout life as they age. Slow down the slowing down is a tagline that I kind of adopted. It's a bit of mindful woo-woo stuff thrown in with how-to stuff, thrown in with, a lot of race recaps. This is what I'm doing, because I realize people really like what I do, even though I try not to be narcissistic, but social media makes you be narcissistic. The algorithm forces you. It's what it rewards you to show your face and all that stuff. People really care about, my races and my training and all that. So I document that, and I realized all of my talents that I have throughout life, audio, voiceover, music production, writing, all that work really well with this brand. I have a podcast, have a blog, have a newsletter, all these different arms that I've built out over the last few years and trying to figure out how to monetize it. But first, I'm really trying to develop trust, and I'm trying to be a brand that is transparent in a way. I want people to go, that guy's cool, he's kind of like me. And I've realized there's a lot of brands that I like that are, I guess I call them person brands. We're like Mark Manson, Tim Ferriss, James Clear, Wait But Why, Tim Urban. So those are like the brands that I really look up to, where it's what you see is what you get. It's not BS. And I realize like a lot of running brands, they're either dry or they're very corporate, and I can fit in the middle and hopefully do my thing and help people along the way. So that's DLake Creates. And marketing is another skill that I use. So with content creation, I am a creative person. That's where DLake Creates comes in. It rhymes. And I didn't want to be like DLake runs, because it's like, okay, you can see I'm running. So I also want to give myself a little bit more for the future, in case if I get away from running, I'm also something else. And then people can follow that. But with the tools and, I guess, lack of automation, because I'm not a software product as you are, as Metagy is. So I really subscribe to the philosophy of doing it manually in the beginning the right way. I've even tried to outsource some of my content creation to people, and they just don't get my tone. I'm still trying to figure out my tone. I think I figured it out over the last 2 years, but it's like, no one's ever going to really write like me. Maybe if I train someone, I could. But, that like putting the camera in front of me, I can't outsource that. So if that's the content that works really well. So I'm trying to figure out a balance of manually doing things and also using tools to automate it, and technology. I love technology. I love scaling. I'm a big fan of efficiency and productivity. So I'd say I'm probably in the middle. I'm not there yet as far as a marketer goes. Most person brands, it's a terrible name for it, I don't know what to call it, but most person brands, they aren't. Tim Urban, Tim Ferriss, he records his own podcast. He does have a team that helps him with the research, that helps him with the editing, the marketing, but he has to sit there and record every podcast. Mark Manson, I'm sure he writes most of his stuff. He might have a team that helps him, but that Mark Manson tone is in there. And I respect that. And I think people, they really cling to your brand and they stay on the long term with you. So if I bring on sponsors, or if I try to sell something later on, then they trust it. Like, I trust Tim Ferriss because he's spent, years researching the product or whatever he does doing. And it's like, oh, Tim Ferriss said this thing, you know what? I'm going to check this thing out because I don't have to research it, because, he only hawks stuff that he's actually used.
A thing that I've picked up on is that, you need to do things that don't scale. And Paul Graham, the Y Combinator founder, he has a great essay that we'll put in the show notes that's called Do Things That Don't Scale When You're First Starting Out Your Business. So for, founders and small business owners that are listening today, I mean, Jensen, you talked about getting your hands dirty on TikTok, finding these micro influencers. Natalie, you're going to retailers, these big retailers, finding out, their exact needs, what kind of engagement they need. Darren, you're recording the podcast. Like, can you tell me about the moment when you sort of realized that it's so important to, do things that don't scale in the early days, don't scale things up, too fast, and, what learnings you've had around that?
In regards to sort of doing things that don't scale, especially around the early stage, it's absolutely paramount, I definitely think, because you need to really connect with your user base or your potential user base. You need to get that sort of product validation. And without that early communication, you're not going to understand whether or not they're actually going to use, purchase, or, engage with any part of your products, your brand, or whatnot. So doing those, what most individuals seen as like grunt work is imperative, because it really gives you sort of like that finger on the pulse understanding of what they want. When you get to levels where you can scale, that you understand your operations of your own system, the next stages of platforms like Metagy and such are transitioning into automation of, say, just general copy, blogs, etc. Platforms that utilize NLP, such as GPT-3, such as Copy AI or Copysmith. That's kind of the next level. And then you also have going on to the next stage of image generation by artificial intelligence, such as DALL-E 2 and Imgen. DALL-E 2 is GPT-3 and Imgen is Google. That'll be kind of the stage 2, and then the final stage will most likely be video generated by artificial intelligence, where you can essentially just write up your brief, populate whatever the hell you want. Now, that's really great, but it depends on the use case, of course. You've got to be like, okay, will my audience resonate with this? In the cases where you need that sort of personalization, that scalability, you got to think like, all right, well, if I'm a personal product, am I the linchpin or am I the bottleneck? And how do I alleviate that? But also the questions you have to ask is, where can I scale and what do I actually realistically need to scale? It's too easy to get stuck into this mindset of like scaling for scaling's sake. Whereas, people come to you for the connection, for the brand, for the value that you add, depending on what product you're selling. You know what I mean? So it's kind of a mixed bag. It's understanding where you're at in the life cycle of your company, of your brand, or whatever product or service that you're doing, and what you can, your sort of like most effective action, really. So what's going to be the most effective, get the biggest bang for your buck, and just take your time on considering that. If you're in early stage, it's getting in front of your customers, it's having that initial conversation, or it's providing value to them that allow them or persuade them to actually connect with you, follow you, use your services. If you're at, say, maybe a Series A or a Series B, you come from a generalist approach to more of a specialist approach within your company, you need to go, okay, what can we realistically scale? Is content generation for content's sake something that we want to do? Sure, happy days. Look at those sort of like new stages of artificial intelligence where you're automatically generating images and copy or video. But it's about, like, these days people prefer authenticity. So you're better off doing bang for your buck and quality over quantity.
So I love this point. So I think that, it's important to sort of have it's fairly cliche, but a bit of balance. Like marketing automation or automation shouldn't really be the crutch that you sort of like rely on. It should like support your activity, because like everyone's using them. Copy AI, it would help you. Let's say if you are, maybe selling some dresses, it would help you create some content around that. But unless you sort of use that as a skeleton that you can then beautify with your own voice, you're just going to sound like any other brand out there. So it's really important for marketers or any like SMEs, you're probably a one-man person. Like, sure, you can go to agencies, but you can't really go and outsource everything. You might do SEO, SEM if you've got the budget, but everything falls on your shoulders. And so it's important to sort of find that sweet spot around, what can I automate but maintain that voice. So it's really interesting that you say that, early stage, getting your hands dirty, you have to go and talk to people yourself, because in my experience, for example, some of the things that we found, what I thought was resonating, what made sense during our problem validation when we uncovered their pain points, didn't resonate from like our value prop when we promoted it. We found that retailers were actually resonating more with things around analytics and insight. And so then I had to repurpose that to to what they were resonating with. But it took a lot of back and forth and manual process for me to get to this point. And so it's really in the early stage around like experimenting with different words, with different content, different techniques. And because we're B2B, like some SMEs might be marketing to businesses. So you can't really use TikTok really easily. You might need to go like a different route, but everything stands still. Like you can't really just rely on automation for the sake of automation.
Also with like understanding your users, the key is you got to look at multiple contact points. So what are they saying about you on social media? You can't always get quality information from feedback forms. So it's like, how do you actually get those insights from users? Are you doing a live session? And you're getting feedback there. Are you looking at the comments in your competitors? Maybe the challenges that they're facing that they're not addressing. That's an easy sort of pain point that you can address. Any comments in your own social, general messages. If you have a community, even better, because then you can ask them directly. So getting that initial feedback is absolutely paramount. And how you do it doesn't necessarily matter as long as you can validate it and then base your hypothesis off there.
Yeah, I agree with both of you on that. And I'd say, even on the how you do it, I love production. I like things that are high quality, and I probably spend too much time on certain things. And I'll just see people not try at all. They don't have any sort of marketing strategy, and they still, quote unquote, win. Or, whatever. It's not really competition, but I see them get success. And I'm like, they're not even trying. They're not organized, and it's just a hot mess. And there's some people I personally know, and I know their inner workings. I'm like, oh, how do you? And they're like, I just wake up and I just post. And I'm like, gross. I cannot do that. It's stressful. Yeah, it's a lot.
If you were to find a marketing automation platform, to find it, okay, it's not that difficult. But then to onboard yourself and then figure out the rules, figure out the processes, figure out how it works for you, there's a bit of a learning curve, time investment. And then there are gaps with every single tool that you use because they may not do what you really want them to do to full extent. So you find yourself sort of like hacking things and spending time doing things. So you're like, I'm just going to post it. I'm just going to bypass all of this. So it's sort of like the investment of, laying the groundwork first. That is a bit challenging. And so they may not know how, and they may not have the time, and it's effortful, and they've got lots of other stuff to do.
What's also interesting about that is, we are essentially playing every social media platform's game. And for them, it's about volume of content, not necessarily quality. And that's why low quality content survives, because for them it's just, all right, how can we get this in front of as many eyes as possible? And it doesn't have to be great to get in front of as many eyes as possible. You look at TikTok, you look at Snapchat, everything's going to like speech to text over random videos. Doesn't really cost much. You can do it on your iPhone. It's pretty straightforward. But to really connect with your user for the long term, it's about producing value. Now, that value can be polished or unpolished. As long as you're providing value to the user, you will retain it, because the goal is to get 1,000 true fans, or, your first 100,000, 500,000, million, whatever. But you only do that by providing that connection and that value of your service, of your brand.
I think definitely I agree with that. Like, I think we're going back full circle. Like, before we had this like trend around, get eyeballs and subscription as a term, but now memberships were fading out. And now what we're seeing is that memberships coming back, loyalty's coming back, and yeah, you might get some eyeballs initially, but how do you sustain that? Because everyone's paying for eyeballs. Everyone's sort of scrolling on their feed. They're forgetting about you in 2 seconds. They can't recall your brand. They might think your content is cool, but how do you maintain that advantage? And ultimately, it has to come to authenticity and building that voice. But then it's easy to say that because everyone talks about authenticity, but what is authenticity in the first place? And I think initially it starts by being true to yourself, and also being really close to your audience in terms of like, how do they think, what values do they have, and embody that, and find your early sort of early birds that essentially resonate with that value so they can help you propagate that. I'm pretty sure, like, Jensen, you've got heaps of stuff to talk about that. Yeah.
I'd definitely say it's like, your number one question is how I can be the solution for my users. That's going to determine the value. You know what I mean? How can I solve their problems and do it as efficiently and effectively as possible? Your story, your narrative, that'll depend on what product or service you're doing. If it's a personal brand, it's like how many people resonate with my story. If it's like just a solution to, a SaaS software, it's like, all right, well, how many people can I fix this pain for? And that's going to be where your value lies.
So yeah, I sometimes take the contrarian route of things, and I personally don't like short form content. So I know social media is a tool, Instagram, TikTok, etc. But I don't think it actually is where my strength is. I think about things in a deep way. I try to be introspective, and that is coming out in my brand, and I'm starting to attract those people. Those people are like 1 in every 100, 1 in every 1,000. Whereas I have a guy that I'm teamed up with, Mike Trees, Run.Energy, and his brand is very different, where he's going for a bigger net, and he actually has very beginner type information. How to run a fast 5K, how to run your first marathon, et cetera, et cetera. And I stayed really far away from that type of content early on because I was like, it's saturated. Everyone's doing it. I don't need to touch that. Everyone could just Google. I've Googled it. What's the point? And then this is kind of two things I'm talking about. We teamed up working on a podcast together. We also do a bit of content. He's got, 250,000 followers. I've got very few compared to that. Like, there'll be some posts and it will get a whole lot of views, a whole lot of likes, but a couple comments, where I'll have posts where it'll be a lot of comments and people going in and they know me personally. And it's like, we're not in a race. His actual goal is very different than mine. He's 60 years old and runs faster than me, by the way, which is amazing. And his goal is to just have 10 clients, and he charges a lot. He's a coach, and he's like, this is perfectly fine. He ran a bunch of businesses. He had a distribution business. He was like, this is fine for me. I really love coaching. So Instagram is a really big top of the funnel for him. And then he gets, high achievers, high earners. So people that can afford it, they go through, and he doesn't care about the bottom feeders. He's also educating people. He has free plans that he gives away. And, but people like here and there. So we tried to actually go deep on his story, and we realized people don't care about his story. People just want to know how to run faster. But then I flip it. My how-to stuff does well, but when I go deep on my story, people are really like engaged, and they're like, oh, what about this, Darren? Oh, all the best. And I get all those messages. The numbers really, they kind of lie depending on your objectives. And I'm realizing I want to get more people off the platforms. This is the whole point of this, to my podcast and my newsletter, because that's where I can do more of the long form stuff. And I'm going to move over to YouTube. I'm trying to first conquer Instagram and then move over to every platform. Doing everything at once is death. Most people know that, but you, brand new marketer or brand new business person, don't try to conquer every platform at once. You will spin out and run out of energy and run out of motivation. Please just do one every 3-6 months, however long. I've been on Instagram for a year and a half, and now I'm going to slowly go over to TikTok, finally. And it's like, how did it take you so long? I'm like, well, there was no rush, and I wanted to figure Instagram out. Exactly. No pun intended, maybe no pun intended. So I'll wrap it all up. But the whole point is, I want those people that want the deeper stuff to come over to the deeper stuff, because I know then I can do more with them, whether that's monetize them or, just create a deeper connection, create more community, et cetera. Instagram, the algorithm, people come on Instagram, they come off Instagram. I know a lot of people that are like, oh man, sorry, I've been off Instagram for 3 months. What's been going on, Darren? And I'm like, oh, so you just haven't seen any of my stuff. Like, that happens, and if they got my emails, it'd be more inclined to maybe click on the email. So I'm gonna end it there.
I think with that, there's a couple of things there. So there's like your expectations and your goals. So what's your goal for your audience, and what's your goal? Like, what are your expectations? If your goal for your audience is create that strong connection, maybe perhaps you have to lower your growth expectations. You will grow slower, but you'll stay more consistent. You'll have higher engagement rates. You also got to look at like, what's your conversion percentage? Maybe if you're growing slower, you'll get a higher conversion percentage. You might sit at like 30, 40%, gold. But if you're going for like speed, volume, broader audience, you might have a lower conversion rate of like, 2 to 7%. So you've really got to look at those analytics, and also what's your end goal? Do you want to build that connection? Do you want to ensure that you're a thought leader within that specific niche? Because you got to remember there's like almost 8 billion people, 8 billion or more, like guaranteed there's going to be at least a couple thousand interested in exactly whatever specific niche that you're presenting. And whether it's from, helping families better communicate, whether it's helping improve conversions in e-commerce, or building your own brand and discussing the nuances of long distance training. So it comes down to what are your expectations and what are the pressures you put on yourself and your business.
So to your point there, Jensen, finding those 1,000 true fans, you mentioned it a couple of minutes ago, fantastic article by Kevin Kelly about 15 years ago. We'll put the link in the show notes to the article. It's fantastic. But I wanted to talk more about, how do you find those 1,000 first fans? I know you've touched on it briefly. Natalie, I know you've worked on something similar, giving you guys a bit more context about Natalie. She's worked with over 500 early stage businesses. One in particular that I have in mind called Perla.com. Shout out to Kurt, our mutual friend, Kurt Walkham. But what they did, they sort of found those 1,000 true fans, and then they used their community as a moat for their business as well. Yeah, Finfluencers. They have a fintech product, Perla.com. We'll put in the show notes. Check it out. Fantastic community. And I know at Together AI, you've built a fantastic community of families as well. So maybe if you guys could tell us about, even a few stories from the community, how it's strengthened those two products and really created that moat around the business.
Yeah, so finding your first 1,000 true fans, I'd say definitely, going back to what I've said previously, of put yourself in their shoes, think about what platforms that they are more likely to engage with and start testing on said platforms. If we're looking at developer communities, we'd be looking at Slack, Discord, Reddit, or 4chan. Know what I mean? If we're talking about parents, initially, depending on the age group, you might be looking at Facebook groups. You might be looking at Instagram. You might want to promote more on Reels. It really depends on sort of where you assume your target market is, and generate content that you think would be appealing to them to start a conversation. Invite them to a closed group. Create a Substack where you're creating content about the topics that they're interested in. Really, it's just, honey for the flies.
And adding to that, it's also finding out who do they go to for knowledge, and then approaching these people and ask them to potentially collaborate or create content, or maybe host them or have them on a show or a podcast like you're doing, because they would allow that's target market to basically attract them to your platform because it's a source of credibility. Now in finance, it's definitely a different landscape because that legally got banned, and not everyone can just give in Australia financial advice, right? But it's definitely a thing that we have evolved as humans to really to look for. So the community aspect is definitely there and growing, and it's used even with startups. They create their own communities to make sure that first they constantly engaging with their user base. They know what's happening. They've got a fan base that's helping them propagate that usage outside of that community. And it's such a really strong, incredible place to it's great to create. Look at Coda. If you're familiar with Coda, it's sort of like Notion. And if you go on their community, it's raging fans who are so passionate, sort of like a nation, nationalism of Coda. And they are big fans, but to build that, obviously it took them a while. And so, adding to that point, go where they are. If they're parents, they might be on Facebook groups talking about, how to share tips. It could be working with maybe potentially doctors or, whatever it is. Maybe it's a bit of an outreach, but it's really about finding out where they are and talking their language. And also, for example, if you go on Reddit, it's not just about I'm just going to go on Reddit, create an account and post. I actually been there, got banned, had to create another account. It's really about being part of that Reddit community and not sort of selling yourself without selling yourself, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. Adding value to the community, but also when growing said community, It's about enabling those champions within those communities. So whether you're paying them or whether you're like helping them out in some way or like some sort of incentive program, maybe they love the adoration and, the fact that they're seen as a knowledge leader or a thought leader in that community. Whatever the approach is, start the relationship. If you see someone that's in your community that's posting pretty consistently, reach out to them and go, we've got additional content. We'd love for you to help out. Or do you have any advice on how we can improve our content? It's about those conversations, and they take time, but they're worthwhile because that bridges those strong networks.
And so like with that, talking to them is such an important thing, because I get startups that often come to me and they're like, Nat, my conversion rate is really low. How do I improve that? How do I grow my wait list? And, they already have customers. And I ask them, like, are you talking to people who have transacted with you? Did you reach out to them? Did you get their opinion? And they say no. And so like when they've had like a few customers who are like, tell me why, like what makes you want to, purchase this product again? Oh, it's a seasonal product. Or I just didn't really think much about it. Or the website, I found it really difficult to navigate. They have things like even if you don't crack it, you will find a piece of gold that would help you, embellish or improve your strategy altogether. So yeah.
I mean, another fantastic Paul Graham essay. Shout out to Paul Graham. I know he's an avid listener of the podcast. One of his other great essays is, you need to get out of the building and talk to customers, as you guys have just been saying. But a lot of business owners sometimes struggle, like, how do I actually do it? Like, how do you guys actually, get outside the building and go and talk to these business owners? What are some of the methods that people can use?
Your network. Guaranteed, any person in your network will know someone that knows someone. If you start small, there is a way. If you go to where events are, where they hang out, there is a way. If you befriend them, if you act like them, if you put yourself in their shoes, like Jensen said, you will figure out one or two people, and from there you can actually ask them, like, who can you think of that is like you, that may need this? And it's really about doing things that don't scale. You have to get out of the building though. Like, it's just imperative. Otherwise, you're just going to be stuck inside and try to figure things out. But it's just a long way to death, I think.
Well, I think also it depends at what stage your company's at, for sure. If you're early stage, bootstrapping, sure, happy days, get out in front of them. If you're at sort of scale up, look at the technologies that'll give you feedback for users. CRO, conversion rate optimization, heat mapping, tools such as Full Story, even sort of like, your actual platform analytics, such as Mixpanel, Amplitude as such, or other ones like UXCam and SmartLook. So if you have an application, you want to do live recordings of your actual users, how they're engaging with your UX. But any opportunity to get like some user feedback, if it's in application, you want to use OneSignal or Apptentive of the such, because you really want to get the immediate feedback whenever a user has a challenge, whether they're rage clicking or, you don't want to get them when they're putting reviews for your product or service saying, couldn't sign on, or like, I got stuck at this specific screen, 1 star, you know what I mean? So really try and get them in before they go public, or if they do go public, bring them in-house in some manner, jump on a call, email them, hit them up on social, be like, you had a shit experience, really sorry. What can we do to improve?
One thing that I've found, I am surprisingly an introvert. I know I come off as extroverted to some people, but I won't go into details of that. But I get extroverted when I'm around people that I like, that they can drain, but they drain my energy. So I guess it's the makeup of me is that even loved ones that I like being around, they drain my energy. So I really like social media for those kind of micro interactions. And my brand is international. And yes, I do meet people out running, and it's pretty cool when they're like, DLake Creates, and I'm like, who are you? And they're like, oh, I follow you on Instagram, or, I listen to your podcast. I'm like, holy shit, it's working. But then I'm like, cool, I couldn't handle that 20 times a day. That would be too much. I don't want to be famous. I think being famous is terrible. But with the internet, I can go, okay, there's a lot of messages today. I'll hit them up tomorrow. And I use the internet as, I guess, going outside, getting outside the office. That's my metaphorical way. But the one point, I guess, that I've found is give value just for value's sake, like you would help a friend or family member out. And then it will come back to you, but you shouldn't ever expect anything to come back. And I know we're all in business and it's all transactional, but don't think of the relationship as transactional. I know it's hard. It's easier said than done, but it's like it will all, if you believe in the universe and all the woo-woo stuff, it will come back to you. And if it's a question and you can easily answer it in 5 seconds, boom, you do that 10, 20 times, 1 or 2 people are going to be like, yo, you're dope, blah, 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 and they'll pass you on to X, Y, Z. And the other 18 people will get it and then forget about it, whatever. But, you're out there, you're communicating with people, even in the direct messages. So, yeah, that's, again, do it because you want to help people and don't expect something, I think.
Oh, 100%. Because, the reality is business is transactional, of course, but what most people fail to realize or to take into consideration is the brand awareness. People often just think, oh, you know what, I get my brand out there, I'll get someone else to plug it, but it's also your brand reputation. And your brand reputation is just as important as anything else. It's peer reviewed. So someone's going to be, do you really like that? Or this shit, the CEO's crap, or I don't like what they're doing ethically. Stuff it. I'm not going to touch that brand. There's going to be 100,000 people to replace you, or 100,000 companies to replace you. So it is about adding that value for value's sake, because you're creating that relationship. It's the old sales adage, you sell to someone like they're your best friend. So you treat them like a friend, and then they'll stick with you through the thick and thin.
It's a great point. One thing that I think Bezos said was, things will always evolve and change. You get new tools and new e-commerce experiences, but the one thing that will never change is a good product. If you just have that, you already you've got a big advantage. So it's not just about listening to the value, but also implementing it with a good product. So just wanted to add that.
And actually, your product's going to be shit for a while. Yeah. It's going to be terrible. And if you're listening to your user and getting that feedback and making the changes, they're going to see that and be like, oh, this brand, this person, this product is trustable because, trustworthy, because they're actually doing what I'm asking.
I wanted to move the conversation to marketing educational resources. So it's great because I always can come to you three in your specific areas for new marketing knowledge, and I can always find out what's working on the front line. But what other marketing resources? Who do you guys learn from? Any specific communities or sites?
You're gonna laugh, but I don't know how this might come across, but I love Twitter. I think there's so much good content there. It's underrated.
The first Australian to love Twitter that I've ever met.
I don't tweet. I'm more of these lurkers on the outside usually. But it's such a good place to get short form content on the things that you want and the things that you like. And marketing is big. You can go niche and follow an SEO blog with some guru, or you can go really wide. But Twitter is one thing that I love. I've also love, if you're sort of depending on what your goal is, if you want to learn the basics, then something like getting certified Google. There's lots of things around SEO and analytics and understanding that. So it depends on what you really want to learn. And if you want to sort of go niche, then there's sort of different ways that you can learn. You can do courses, or you can even subscribe to newsletters. There's a really good one called Irene or something like that. I can send it to you later. But it's a vast place, and for me, it's going the DIY sort of approach of being all across different things, and also learning by doing. So that's the best place.
Yeah, I agree. There's the fundamentals that you need. such as, understanding each ad platform. Most social media platforms will have their own education process for understanding how to utilize it and get the most out of it. Facebook, Google, everything else. But I think for more the nuanced stuff, you want to look at additional marketing micro-influencers, and you'll find those on TikTok. You'll find, I'm very adamant about TikTok because you've got to look at what's the next fastest growing social media platform and how do you take advantage of that platform's actual growth. And at the moment, TikTok's on the rise. It's going to be on the rise for quite some time. Every other major platform's following it with short form content. So going with the trend is the best way to go. For additional resources, there's a myriad of stuff. For your long tail stuff, I'd look at medium.com, because normally you have like professionals that are writing long form blog site content. Substack has a number of different bits and pieces that could be great, but realistically, just search via hashtag, jump onto TikTok and start watching.
Yeah, correct.
We'll put a link to your TikTok channel, Jensen, in the show notes as well. Some great short form content on there.
I'd say it's personal, and again, I consume things differently. I realize that most people are saying the same stuff, and as far as like new trends and new, everyone's gonna be reporting on the same thing. So I follow, I think I like newsletters. I love newsletters. Even though I am a podcaster, I have a podcast production company. I'm an audio guy. I actually don't listen to podcasts that much. I'm very particular. One, because my ear space, all my, it's all being taken up because I'm making stuff, and very particular. And I also sometimes just don't want to learn. I just want to be motivated and influenced by Disney Marvel movies. So Marvel, not really Disney, but and then sometimes I'll apply the story concept. So I actually look to other places to get inspiration and then learn how to be a better marketer or a better storyteller, a better creator. I think it's more like frameworks. I guess I am giving the framework right now. Subscribe to 2, maybe 3 in whatever platform you like your content, your educational content. So again, I like newsletters. The only marketing podcast I listen to is Marketing School, because the format is borderline genius. And even though the quality is not really where I'd like it as far as like the production quality, their actual content quality is good. Those are 2 different things. It's just a Marketing School by Neil Patel and Eric Sue. And they just, in 5 to 7 minutes, they just give you value. Like, bam, bam. It's just value on top of value. And it's just like, here's a bunch of experience that we have and knowledge. Take it for free. Run with it. I'd say that's probably it. And, blogs are kind of dying. Like, no one's really subscribing. You don't get, I used to love the RSS feeds and, you get the blog, but because of podcasts, because of short form content, because of Medium, because of LinkedIn, most blogs are now on all of these platforms and publishers. So yeah, you just need to follow a couple and you'll start seeing the general trends and watch, you'll like, they're all saying this over here. Cool, implement it. If you love one, stay with that one. You don't have to listen to every single one.
Actually, this is a little subject change. In regards to sort of creating content, I think it's paramount to maybe take an approach like you're creating content like a comedian. You're going to have jokes that are amazing. You're going to have jokes that are fucking terrible. So most people get a bit scared about what they put out there, that it's like, it's not good enough. It's not polished enough. It needs this and this and this. Someone's going to hate it, blah, 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 blah. Like with everything, never enter the comment section. Don't worry about your haters. Just put it out there and base it on engagement. Good or bad engagement, as long as you're getting that exposure, and be willing to try new pieces of content, whether it's, generating content using AI, whether it's generating content that's polished or unpolished or whatever, or different styles, you know what I mean? Like, throw something out there, try an animation, just see what sticks and don't be afraid to do it, because that's the whole approach. It's experimentation.
And it's hard for everyone. Like, I was attending an event where they're really large brands, and you'd think like on the outside, they're probably just sipping tea all day because they don't have to worry about their audience engagement because they're that big. But they're like really stressed on the inside. They're like, we don't know what content would work. We don't know like if this engagement's going to like be high enough or not. And so like, if you're an SME, like, don't feel like, I haven't figured that out yet. Everyone has the same sort of a problem, and even like the big guys, they're constantly thinking about, how do I do this? How do I do that? And it's a it takes a lot of creativity. It takes a lot of persistence. And I have a lot of respect for people who constantly push out content like on TikTok, because it's video and it takes a lot of effort. And so I'm impressed by the amount of engagement there is, like creators that are shipping content. But like, yeah, I think it's definitely a hard game. I would be curious to see how that evolves from there. Will TikTok always be a thing? Will video, is that like a short-term thing that we're going to see, or what's next? Like this is where it's like, that's where it gets spicy.
What's next?
Okay, if we're talking about what's next when it comes to...
Oh, hold on. Before you talk about what's next, because I want to stay on this. It's kind of it's just a random tip that I've realized with my brand, how I can scale and automate things. So go back to the whole thesis of all of this, which is, how to use automation tools. What I do, because I have long form content and I'm actually good at it, whether it's a long blog post or a podcast, when you do long form, and by long form, pretty much anything longer than 3 minutes, usually, 5-10 minutes, that's when you get in a long form territory. So YouTube videos are perfect. If you're sitting on that and you create that, you most likely now have segments in there. And now you have multiple pieces of short form content that can go out in so many different formats. Obviously short video. So if you recorded a video, you recorded a podcast, you now have multiple short videos. So I think I have my personal podcast. I've gotten it down to about 10 to 20 minutes now per episode, very marketing school style. And within that, especially if we do a listicle, top 8 things to run your best 5K, blah, 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 that type of stuff. Now I have minimum 8 pieces of short form content, plus, a little side rant that we do, a little story. And then there might be an infographic in there. And there also is going to be obviously quotes. So this is Gary Vee's 68 pieces, content stacking or pillars. So just as far as automating, if you record it once and you already done the pre-production, all you got to do is edit it and make sure you're thinking about future content, and you technically have scaled. You don't have to sit there and go, I need to think of a quote and I need to think of, an infographic. So that's one cool hack that I am very grateful my super analytical, obsessive, compulsive, process-driven brain does very well, which is chop things up. But think about in the beginning that I'm going to chop it up later.
I think I would love to read a blog article on like how you do that. I mean, like how much time does this take up? During how long does it take you to do all of this? Because like let's say you're you're selling candles, or like you're a plumber, like how do you then adjust like this sort of chopping different sort of content and adjusting it to what you need and how much time you can dedicate? Because obviously it takes a lot of time to even think about the stages. Like, do you have a particular sort of like I don't know, tips on how one can be consistent and continue building up on those habits?
Yeah. I'll do a quick version because this is a episode in its own self, and I will definitely put this out. It seems like there's interest in it. The pre-production or the ideation, and like basically how long I spent figuring out doing the brief for this panel discussion, that's where, if you're going to spend the most amount of time, do it there. And you'll have an idea of what it needs to be chopped up into. You probably, or whoever was there helping you do that, should be doing the editing of the content. So not saying like, if you're not an audio editor or video editor, give that to an editor to do like the actual editing of it. I'm talking about like the editorial creative editing, where you go through it, maybe go through the show notes of your podcast. You're trying to figure out what's the points of this blog post or the video. YouTube now has the segments of where you can click through, which is great because it breaks up into little pieces. Then you've already done that list in the beginning in the pre-production phase. You then are just looking for that at the end. And it gets faster. The iterations, it's like anything. I've gotten so much faster. And then you can, once you figure out, you do it well once, then you can 5-10x that up by bringing in, again, a video editor. You can bring in someone to do that content editorial edit. Obviously, podcast editing, you can have someone do the infographics. So I timed it all from beginning to end. And I think a podcast episode takes me anywhere from like 7 to 9 hours if I do everything myself, plus all the promotional materials, plus all the, the email newsletters and all that stuff. And now I've got it down to about 2 to 3 hours. And that's me actually hitting record and recording it. I edit it myself because I'm an audio editor. So I'm a producer. I'm really quick with that tool, but I give the video editor all the video stuff. I have all these other people on my team helping me out with all the other itty bitty stuff that took the other 5-6 hours. So that's a quick one. Sorry to derail. I know you wanted to talk about the future. Do you want to talk about the future?
Let's talk about the future.
All right.
Actually, back to that, like, if you are sort of like a plumber or whatnot, generally speaking, content around education of tips is going to be your best friend. So like you're a hairdresser, this is how I do this style, showcasing, if you do like cosmetic tattoos, okay, this is my particular technique. A plumber, this is me on a job site. This is the job that we're doing today. Even just sort of like ad hoc content like that is perfect. You don't always have to overplan it. It's great to plan it if you have the time, but if you have limited resources, ad hoc is just on point. You know what I mean? You got to think like, what's the best I can do with what I've got?
And, that's exact opposite of what I'm doing. I really like the pre-production phase. So I love the researching and I love the planning. Some people hate it. Some people are just like, a guy that I know, he wakes up and he just posts whatever he can. And that works for him. So, my way is a certain way. It allows me to have more content later though. And then there's no stress later. I've got 60 pieces of content that I'm sitting on that I'll spread out over the course of 3 to 6 months. And also I'm not rehashing stuff, I ran out of stuff for this month. Let me rehash from last month. I think I rehash my content, which is repost maybe every 9 to 12 months. So I've got that much of a back catalog and I'm being as comprehensive as possible. So it's like, it's anxiety and stress and work now for less anxiety and stress later. Whereas, maybe if you're a hairdresser or whatever, you're just posting, you might have that like stress, but you might like that. I don't like that. So everyone's different. And yeah.
It's so interesting because it's kind of like a Venn diagram in terms of like coming up with ideas. You've got like the why we do it, how we do it, and who we are. And if you sort of like take these 3 sort of angles and map out different sort of ideas around each sort of bracket, you come up with so many ideas around what we can do. Like if you're a plumber, like why we're doing it, it could be like talking about, the story or like, the motivation or like, the story of how plumbing even started. Like I'm pretty sure many people would tune into that. But if it's sort of like, how do we do it? It's sort of like, about tips and educational process. I think like one of the frameworks that I like to go by is like, the how, the what, and the who. And, that sort of like gets my brain just flowing with ideas around what we can do. So just one thing.
Talking about the flow of ideas and creativity, we've touched on it a couple of times. Like, what are your sources of creativity? How do business owners become more creative? I mean, talking about plumbers and different industries. I mean, even a great example is that Dollar Shave Club video. They built an entire business on this viral video that we'll put in the show notes as well.
That's not to shave my balls. Is it?
That's a different one, yeah. Which one are you talking about?
There's the ball.
Manscaped.
Yeah, sorry.
Dollar Shave Club. We'll put the video in the show notes. They built an entire business around it, sold it for over $1 billion, I believe. Started as a small business, but yeah, interested to hear about your different sources of creativity and inspiration and how business owners can leverage that.
I would actually probably agree with Natalie's process of the how, the what. The why, the what, and the how. But realistically, looking at other competitors, but also looking at peripheral companies that may just generally be creating really good content. TikTok has their ad creative marketplace where you can actually see what's the top trending advertisements. And you can actually search via click-through rate. And so it's a matter of just mimicry. Really, you can look at, all right, what's trending, what's something different, maybe look at sort of trending sounds. The thing is, you get a delay of about a week to 2 weeks between a trending sound on TikTok and a trending sound on Instagram Reels, which is quite interesting. So it means anything that you create on TikTok, you can then, there's a purposing schedule, which is fascinating. But really, it's just about trying anything new, you know what I mean? And then looking at the conversion rates of like, is this converting? Look at your metrics, look at your ad platforms, look at your dashboards, look at whatever you have, even your engagement rates.
I also love, a formula that, is sort of breaking down into like the 70-20-10 rule, which is like doing like 70% of like, what's working and then 20% on like more like stable stuff that sort of would work in the industry and then 10% around like creative growth hacks, excuse my jargony term around growth hacking, but, it doesn't have to be like creativity as the like an ongoing muscle that you're constantly using 24/7. It could be something that, you've got a layer of experimentation around that's creative. So you can just try out like different sort of crazy ideas out there every now and then, but I don't think it should, take up your 100% of your time. But the 70% to find that and doubling down on that, that's where I think this is where it gets really fun. And I guess, coming up with these ideas around trends and analytics, and, that's where it gets interesting. Or delegate it, like, especially with startups, like you assemble a team with the things that, that have skills that you may not have strongly. So, and I think, if someone's not creative, then it doesn't, why not get someone that has these skills and help you out on that, as long as you still, as part of a core person in the business, you still have your voice in that process and not lose that. It's just like, I'm just going to delegate it. Otherwise, it's just going to sound like very generic. So it's about, smart creativity.
Well, definitely on the delegation, like your micro influencers, your content creators, they're often better at creating content than you are. Yeah. So you might as well pay them to do it. You know what I mean? Like these guys are budding. They're, eager to start their careers. And you can get them for cheap, you can create those long-term relationships, and they will experiment for you if you give them enough free rein. Don't write a creative brief that's like so structured and, restricted. Write something that allows them to play with it. Like we had a guy, Sam Van Fossen, who did this amazing black and white about the dangers of artificial intelligence. And it was hilarious. And all he was doing was like a comedic skit of him in a cardboard box pretending to be a robot. It was awesome.
I'd like to say I'm, 55% creative, 60% creative, and 40% analytical. And I always thought that was like, bad. Whereas I know a lot of creative people, because I have a big music background, music production, and they're just very like, bro, just let it free flow, man. And I'm like, no, it needs to be structured. But, but then I also am like, well, I want to break out of the structure. So I found that having frameworks and processes and systems has actually helped my creativity. So David Allen, who wrote Getting Things Done, or as I could say, Getting Shit Done, great book on the frameworks and the processes of organizing yourself. And what's really cool is that he actually is a very creative person. He wrote this really, procedural productivity book that a lot of business people, he's a consultant, but he's actually a very creative person. And the reason why he's so creative is because everything is organized, and that allows him to be free. So it's the whole, like, your discipline allows you to have freedom. It's that kind of, it feels like it shouldn't work. It feels like it's contradictory. So I guess a quick insight would be for me, what I do is I have buckets of ideas. So I have random ideas all the time. And I feel like I have more ideas than the normal person. And it's like overwhelming. I'm just like, oh my God, I got to write this down. I got to put this. And then I use my email as a place to hold all these ideas, and terrible place to organize your life, by the way. And then I would go through every few months and be like, oh my God, I spend 3 hours going through my email. And I'm like, oh. So I finally created this wacky system using Evernote, Asana, Todoist, Google Calendar. I don't like that I'm using all these apps, but they just don't all do the same thing, and I need them. And I basically create these containers. And this is the hardest part. I'm disciplined enough and have a schedule to sit down, and then when I go to create, I go for these containers that are all labeled in different categories, and then I pull them for my inspiration to then create whatever it is. And that has worked pretty well. I still have anxiety because I'm human, and I think that's just a part of me. But with that, I am not starved of content, where I know some people are, I don't know what to post. I'm like, how is that possible? I have my Evernote of potential stuff, my ideas will last me to my life, and I'll pass it on to my son. And they'll probably 80% of it will never get done. And I've finally been okay with that. I'm like, 80% of these ideas will never be a thing, and they'll just sit in Evernote, and they'll just go away when the world ends. But that's fine. And I'd much rather have too much than not enough. And I also then run that through the filter, and I guess a Venn diagram of what do I want to do over here? What do my customers, clients, whoever, potential fans want over here? What's in the middle? And sometimes I do a little bit more of what I want. Sometimes I do a little bit more of what they want. And I feel bad, because I don't like doing what they want usually, because it's usually just generic stuff. And I'm like, I want to do the cool stuff. Some of my cool stuff fails. My really quirky, deep stuff, people don't give a shit about it. But then going all the way to right, I feel like I'm just selling out. So I find that middle ground, and, through as much content as I have or content ideas, I can then produce from there. So that's automate that, please, for me. Can you create a company that automates that for me? Automate creativity, like, or you create some sort of an app that helps my brain.
Well, I definitely agree with that. But in terms of the individuals that are like, I don't know where to start, it's just get started, because it's the repetition that develops your creativity. Like, you look at, individuals that create cartoons for the New York Times, and 90% of their cartoons or drawings will be terrible, but they'll get that one or two that'll get picked up and they're like, this is great. But it's the practicing every single day. So if you have a strategy where you can go, okay, well, this is what I want to do and this is what's actually popular, and I can find that sweet spot in the middle, and then just keep aiming for that sweet spot and just like pump out terrible stuff. Just be comfortable with pumping out terrible stuff, and you'll occasionally get a gem that just resonates with your audience and they'll be like, fuck yeah, that's gold. And that's kind of the...
Something that also happens when you pump out a lot of terrible stuff, your terrible stuff actually becomes quite average. And like, it's the whole, shoot for the stars, you'll land on the moon. And you become so good that it's like, you're like, oh, that sucks. And then it's actually like, it's actually pretty good. But then your amazing stuff obviously blows that out the water, but you just raise the bar of, your below par, below average stuff. And that's interesting when I realized I got there, and I'm not saying I'm this great creative person, but you start trusting your instinct, and then you start taking more chances, and because you're like, what's the worst that can happen? It's average. Like, and then average, I'll still, my engagement is still decent because whatever, the algorithm still sends it out to X amount of people. I still get this many likes and this many comments, like on a bad post. And that's kind of cool, but in the beginning, it will suck. So if you're a beginning marketer, beginning business, you will have some stuff that just gets 5 likes and you're like, really? Or whatever it is, sometimes 0. And that's okay though.
I think, get feedback from people who are good at what they're doing. Like, I've seen SMEs who, for example, would go on Instagram, go on Canva, come up with some like facts, post them every day, have like some fluffiness and stickers, and then post them and be like, have 58 or 60 of these posts on Instagram, not see any engagement. And then, you're sort of like, okay, practicing and improving yourself, but like ultimately you will get tired of that. So I really recommend, if you know someone, to reach out to them, have a chat, grab a coffee, pick up their brain, and then just see how you go from there. Just learn from other people.
Well, I think it's very much like, even back to like exercise training, you basically look at your numbers and you look at where you're improving and where you need to improve. And it's that iteration of the combination of the creative and the analytics. Okay, I'm producing a whole volume of, mediocre, sometimes great, sometimes terrible content, but what's resonating? You know what I mean? And then just following that little rabbit hole and seeing how deep you can go with it.
So I wanted to close off this creativity thread and go into, what's next. But before we do, wanted to touch on creativity in conjunction with artificial intelligence. Do you think we'll always need that human element, or will we get to a stage where a program like Copy AI is writing funnier jokes than, Jerry Seinfeld, Dave Chappelle, and Bill Burr?
I definitely think it's going to need some form of human interaction. We're not quite there yet. There's still a while before the singularity. But like we're still going to have that point where you need that validation, whether it's writing copy, whether it's generating images, whether it's having like AI generating videos, or like these days AI generating short films. You know what I mean? Like, you always need that human interaction to validate it. Because humans are the ones that are going to convert on it or be engaged in some way through it. So you're always going to need that.
Yes, I agree with Jensen. But at the same time, I'm also scared because, scientists have come up with a fake influencer that's based on, pure AI, made her have like a Instagram page. She became an influencer, had like thousands of followers, and they were just based on Instagrammy sort of, fake photos generated with the same person. And she was getting like, crazy amount of engagement, then getting sponsored. What started off as an experiment ended up being like an actual thing in business. And so that's a bit scary. I think when we see things like that, it does send a bit of a signal around, like what's going to happen next, especially around, for example, modeling. brands trying to like cut down on costs, they get like, AI generated models where they've got like the clothes fittings all on, using AI. So the amount of creativity will definitely have AI helping it out, but like it is a bit scary with like, it is moving fast. And it's one of these things where like, I don't want to sort of just say it will always count, on human beings, because I think we're living in an era where like, things are moving really fast, and 10 years from now we might not realize how things like evolve. Our parents were really surprised. Like I remember my parents always say they were super surprised when like they would watch James Bond movies and they would see like a James Bond pulling up like a mobile phone and be like, I'm going to call someone, and they would just laugh. And now they've got like an iPhone that they're really easily using. So I would like to think that humans will always be in the loop, but I also am a bit scared, to be honest.
I think it's going to be a bit of a mixed bag. You have like your social effects, and then you have your actual business effects. From a business standpoint, I think it'll be like a great tool to implement. You know what I mean? You look at ZMO.ai, where you can artificially create a whole bunch of models and then throw your product on them and like change the shape, and they look incredibly real. Next step will be like generating video content or having like artificial influences you can populate, and deep word and synesthesia are kind of moving into those platforms where you just need to take a recording of some person and then the AI changes their facial features based on the text or the audio or whatnot. It's really interesting. But then when you start talking about like metaverses and, where you've got completely digital influences where people are just rocking up, they've got a set, they've got a green screen, they've got like a capture suit on, and they're interacting with people inside a metaverse as an influencer. The stage past that is where you have an artificial intelligence replacing said influencer. So I think like the ethics around that is a different story, but from a business use case, you're looking at like the themes, the topics, all of the sort of psychological systems around like problem solution and frameworks are going to still be there. It's just the medium that's changing, and your understanding of how the medium changes is where you're going to be able to better position your business to adapt faster. Say, for example, if you want to play in the metaverse, get an understanding of platforms like Unity. If you're looking at sort of blockchain technology, understand like Solidity and distributed ledger technology. You just really need to choose like what's going to be the next stage for my vertical and how can I adapt that. If it's e-commerce, all right, cool, we can lower our costs by getting rid of some models and replacing them with digital ones. If we're talking about like education, all right, I can build out a whole learning management system, like an e-course or some sort of online course. And I don't have to present it. I can just get some AI to do it for me. But all I need to do is write it up, or even they can help me write up part of it.
Yeah, I definitely love this point, especially around like, getting the initial creativity, but then using your own to it's sort of why like I think machine learning will be something not necessarily AI, because like I think AI is more like the application of that human intelligence and being able to do that, apply these human activities and mental models. But machine learning, like processing imagery and automating things a lot quicker, I think will be definitely the place where like ideas, creative ideas will be born but not executed, I don't think.
See, like our kind of focus at Together AI is literally, we've got a digital companion for children. It helps them navigate how they grow up, building emotional intelligence and everything else. The medium we're currently using is an app. Yep, they chat to it, happy days. Now, all we need to do is literally take that brain and that logic and put it into a metaverse. And they've got a digital companion in a digital world that's helping them navigate said digital world. That's one example of sort of like adapting to the new medium as it comes forward. But you've got to look at your vertical and what's required.
Yeah, we're going the opposite way. We're actually doing like non-AI stuff. And even though we started off as AI, but it's sort of like we went to, like, what do people want? What are the basics? And then we will build up intelligence on top of that rather than start with intelligence. But everyone's very different. And so like the vertical is definitely, it changes
Well, that goes back to like your true audience and what's going to resonate with your audience. Some people in your audience will be like, nah, fuck that new tech shit. I want old school. I want to see someone face to face. I'm just happy with that. And you're like, gold. I just need 1,000 of them or 100,000 or whatever. And that's my people. Yep. You know, if that's your thing and that works, do it. But just remember, like, AI, machine learning, it's mainly here to help you automate most of your stuff.
Exactly. And like, especially in e-commerce, for example, there's so many different players around recommendations. And, you know, we help you optimize your user journey using AI. And there's a lot of competitors that we have in that space. Our, like, I guess, theory is, our hypothesis is that it's not about relying on these like AI models. It's really about having that direct human input that helps you recalibrate these models rather than just rely on them completely. That's why I'm not a really, you need that creative input, that human input. Otherwise, it's just a pure guessing game. It's sort of like you go into a store and like the store assistant is like hiding behind a counter and then just trying to help you. But you need that sort of like, back and forth input from the customer in real time to help you like calibrate what you can help them with. And I think that creativity it still applies because you need this like human intelligence that's based off like millions of data points, and that I don't think we're there yet. And
every business will have these small little nuances that can't necessarily be taught, I should say. So say, for example, retail, it's like, seeing a customer grab a piece of clothing and then putting it down and then taking it and just being like, oh, I was going to buy that, and then convincing the customer to buy it. Like little, small, soft skills. And those soft skills might be something different depending on sort of what vertical. It might be like, having a one-on-one with an actual person and dealing with a bespoke problem. There'll always be things that can't translate to the use of AI and ML.
Product finders, interestingly, are something that are on the rise in e-commerce. Like if you're looking to buy, a washing machine or something, you sort of go through, if you break down like talking to a store assistant with functional products, you've got different sort of like rule-based questions that you go with, like, how big is your apartment? How many people need it? Like, do you need like eco-friendly? Like how important is it to have, like a environmentally water smart, whatever. And so then they recommend some products. And I think that, this is being like automated but they're more like algorithms. And I think there's lots of confusion around what is AI and what is just like an algorithm process that's just replicating basic human rules.
So guys, conscious of your time, thank you so much for contributing a lot of your knowledge today. I mean, we've covered a lot. It's been a wide-ranging conversation, the future of AI, automation, how to build community, content marketing, content stacking, a lot of Paul Graham essays as well. It's going to be a bumper edition of the show notes. But before you go, there is one question that we like to ask all of our guests. It's our Elon Musk patent pending question. I'll get an answer from all three of you. So this is it. You're on the Falcon X spaceship on the way to Mars with Elon Musk and the first settlers. What business do you build when you land on Mars, and how do you market it to the new Martians?
So this is an interesting question. I kind of can go back and forth on this, but I would say probably a bank, be like a future Rothschild of Mars, or like a second one would be like maybe a VC, really, because like just to build a founder hub on Mars. Because if you think about it, you need like sheltering and water and food and entertainment. You can be like starting a Netflix on Mars. But like I think where my heart truly is would be like water purification and distribution, if I were to actually go there. So yeah,
it'd be great to start the first VC, finger in every pie on Mars.
Exactly.
I like that.
Exactly.
I like water purification.
Yes, it's like a VC or like a founder hub or a water distribution and purification center. Yeah, on demand, of course.
As I usually go contrarian and some weird answer, I'm going to go with something super generic, and I'd probably go broad and do a fitness brand, even though I am very specific with running and endurance sports, and I leave the whole fitness and health, that's a bit too broad for me. But I'd actually try to be the first one to capture fitness and health because it's going to be crucial to, I think there's less gravity. You work less. Yeah, it's like on the moon. Yeah, so you have to properly like train and keep your muscles and bones because our physiology has not adapted for Mars, as it has here on Earth. So that would be the first thing. And marketing it, normal marketing channels, you're going to have the same humans up there. So just, figuring out what people want and working backwards from there and giving them what they want and going, hey, got this boot camp happening on, I don't even know the areas, on Red Mountain X, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to get it done.
I forgot to answer the marketing part. I would just go with offline advertising, just because I just put them on all the mountains and go back to old school billboards.
Do you know what? I'm a big fan of boring businesses because they're consistent. I love new ventures because it's fully creative and everything else. I'd probably go waste management because we've already stuffed up this planet, so we don't want to stuff up the next. So it's how do you effectively recycle and reuse everything? And we're bound to generate a lot of shit. So literally and figuratively, all of the above. So yeah, how would I market it? Do you know what? It's one of those things that it's so ingrained in society that I don't think it'd be difficult to market it. You got a whole bunch of stuff, we'll take care of it, we'll sort it out, you don't have to think about it, done. Yeah.
Excellent. Look forward to sampling all three of these businesses on Mars. Jensen, Darren, Natalie, thank you so much for coming on. You can check out all the show notes from this episode. You can listen to more fantastic guests like these three of the leading marketers in Australia and globally. Guys, we'll put your Twitter details, your LinkedIn details if anyone wants to reach out to you for more information in the show notes as well. Thank you so much for coming in.
All right, thank you so much for listening. Really appreciate it. You know the drill. Make sure that you follow, subscribe, depending on wherever app you're on, whether you're listening to this as a podcast or you're watching it on YouTube, LinkedIn, wherever you get this. It really helps us get the word out. And if you're feeling this and you've gotten some value, please make sure you share this with someone that you know. And we'll see you on the next episode.